Okay, so a couple of days ago, reports had emerged that Final Fantasy IX was supposed to be getting a remake, which is supposed to be coming out sometime in the future, whether it be 2024 or 2025. I don't think that's something that Square Enix has officially confirmed. We haven't seen a reveal trailer or gameplay footage of the remake of Final Fantasy IX, and Final Fantasy IX is a game that's underrated, doesn't get as much love as it deserves. Definitely deserved a remake at least a decade ago. But another game that really deserved a remake was its sequel. And what I mean by that, I mean Final Fantasy X and Final Fantasy X Part 2. Those two games came out, I believe, between '01 and '03, and people loved those two Final Fantasy games. In fact, they are honestly like the most memorable Final Fantasy games of the 2000s. Don't get me wrong, Final Fantasy 12 was actually a really good RPG game as well, but I feel like Final Fantasy X is more iconic for the most part because of the story, because of the characters. I honestly feel like, Titus was like one of the more popular characters in the Final Fantasy series. I don't think he was quite on the level as Cloud Strife, but he's been better than and more memorable than some of the other characters that we've gotten, along with the fact that we got Yuna and the Gold Wings in Final Fantasy X Part Two, and having like the Gold Wings or like the trio of girls as the main characters of Final Fantasy X Part Two was something that was new at the time. It was something that was kind of a big deal, and I actually had the remastered versions of Final Fantasy X and or sorry Final Fantasy X and X Part Two, and honestly, the game was really fun. Unfortunately, I don't have it with me anymore, but the game was fun when I had it, and I honestly feel like this is something that should have been done a long time ago in terms of it getting an actual remake. Now, is Square Enix going to do this, and should they do this? Absolutely, but I feel like this is going to come after they remake Final Fantasy IX because I'm starting to see a pattern here. It's like they start out with seven, and then they're moving on with like nine, and obviously, they're going to eventually remake, some of the older games as time go by. I'm not quite sure whether or not they're going to do anything with Final Fantasy 11 because I believe Final Fantasy 11 was more of an MMORPG, and you had to have servers and all that stuff to make that run. And Final Fantasy 11 is something that's really forgettable. Hardly anyone ever talks about it. Yeah, I mean, I feel like Final Fantasy 10 Part 1 and 2 are like two of the most popular installments in the entire decade. I won't say series because that's something that's subjective. But as far as the decade is concerned, Final Fantasy X was definitely better than 13, better than 11, and it was just about as good as Final Fantasy 12, but more memorable. But yeah, it seems like Square Enix is going to have a lot on their plate in terms of remaking old Final Fantasy games in the future. Now, as far as whether or not there's any smoke to the fire that we're getting a Final Fantasy X remake. Um, I read on Game Rant that a person who has leaked games regarding Square Enix and Final Fantasy series in the past. He claims that Final Fantasy X remake is on the way, and obviously, Square Enix is going to keep us in the dark about it because it's something that's going to get people's hopes up, and it's going to bring more attention to them in general as a company. But honestly, it's only a matter of time before the Final Fantasy X Part One and Two remakes come, and I'm just wondering whether or not they consider remaking any spin-off Final Fantasy games in the future. But who knows? I mean, I think they're just going to go with what sells. And honestly, Final Fantasy X was a huge attraction on the PlayStation 2, and I do feel that with that being the case, this is their opportunity to remake a classic for the PlayStation 5, try to introduce those two games, Final Fantasy 1 Part 1 and 2, to a more modern audience while giving hardcore fans of the series what they want. And and yeah, I honestly think it'll be a huge attraction. But by the time they get to that and they officially remake and release Final Fantasy 10 Part 1 and 2, it's probably going to be like it's like it's sometime like around 2026, because right now Final Fantasy um, 9 remake doesn't have an official release date or release year just yet. And like I said, people are speculating that'll come sometime next year or in 2025. So my guess is that if the rumor is true that we're getting a Final Fantasy X remake, it's probably going to happen sometime between 2026 or maybe 2027.